en el proyecto del 25.
So the Lincoln Project is a group, a Republican group, conservative group that is essentially a never-Trumper group, right? They oppose Trump, his policies, his agenda, the people around him, their agenda. They've made a video called Aftermath, which is basically like, what happens if Trump is reelected, based a lot on this thing called Project 2025, which is a document the Heritage Foundation put together. Really long document, like almost 1,000 pages, outlining a whole bunch of stuff with immigration, with consolidation of executive power, and with all sorts of policies that they would hope to see put into action if Trump is elected. So the Lincoln Project made this video, Aftermath. It's like 4 minutes long. I thought we would just watch it, kind of talk about it as we watch it. I find it, just right off the bat, I find it hyperbolic. Not to say that it's all wrong or whatever. It's a prognostication, right? They're saying if Trump is elected, this is what we think will happen. But the nature of the beast here is that they are trying to frighten people so that they will become politically active and vote against Trump. So let's watch it. Let's see what will happen.
November 5th, 2024. Donald Trump defeats a divided and dispirited Democratic campaign. On January 20th, 2025, Donald Trump is sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. Unfortunately, he keeps his promises. Trump seizes control of a divided government, signing hundreds of executive orders implementing Project 2025.
Okay. I like the language here, seizes control. If he's elected, he's not seizing control so much as being elected into office. Let's calm down. And so here they're making the assumption that he will implement all of Project 2025. And I just want to point out at the beginning here that Trump will be certainly in a position of power with 6 conservative Supreme Court justices if he takes, if he sweeps the Senate and the House and all 3 branches of government are controlled by Republicans, then he will definitely be in a very strong position to implement a lot of this agenda. However, I think it's important to remember that the first rule of negotiations is that you negotiate from a position of strength, right? Whether you're talking politics, business, or just, if I'm selling a desk online, on Facebook Marketplace or something, I'm going to list the price at $150, even if I know that ultimately I would willingly take $50. I'm going to ask for $150 and hope that someone just pays that or offers $100 or whatever. I'm not going to start at $50 because that would be a terrible negotiation tactic. And the same thing is true here with Project 2025. There's a whole lot of stuff that is fairly radical, and even Trump has distanced himself from it, saying that he would not support all of this, or he said he doesn't even know what it is or who's behind it, and some of it's abysmal. Like, this is all from the horse's mouth, and I think that's true. I don't think Trump is going to be aligned with everything in Project 2025, and on some things they've just left it out completely, like Medicare and Social Security, which a lot of conservatives want to dismantle or really, really restrict or overhaul, and Trump does not. Trump does not want to overhaul Medicare or Social Security, and he wants to keep those benefits in place. Same thing with abortion. A lot of conservatives are hardcore anti-abortion, whereas Trump, he's already said he doesn't want a federal abortion ban. So anyways, the point is Project 2025 is this is their $150 asking price for the desk. But in reality, even if you're coming at this with a united government, you are still not getting everything you want. Now, the fear-mongering is that Trump will become a total dictator and will just make all of this happen. But there are a lot of institutional obstacles for that to happen in the United States, including a lot of Republicans who I don't think would actually want to completely dismantle our democracy, our republic. So, anyways.
Trump replaces over 50,000 civil servants with hardline MAGA loyalists. The federal oath of office now requires declaring loyalty to the president, not the Constitution.
All right, we'll stop that again. So this is part of Project 2025, is the idea that get rid of, regular federal government employees and replace them all with appointees. This is something that I think that Trump would do, but I think that it's going to be more difficult than people realize. Like, that's a lot of people to replace, and to replace them with MAGA loyalists, I think would be a Herculean task. It's just going to be really hard to get all those jobs. First of all, you're replacing so many people, and then and you have to retrain everybody. You have to get actual loyalists in there, and then they've got to do the work. That sounds like something that you could just do at the signing of a pen and just easily like shuffle everybody out and put all these loyalists in. But that's a really tall order. So we'll see how well that works in practical terms. And what that also opens up for, the next administration, if it's a Democratic administration, is that they could do the same exact thing. Just get rid of all of those people and replace them all with Democratic loyalists. So that would be so inefficient. Like, talk about making government less efficient, making the entire federal bureaucracy completely politicized. So that's a terrible idea, and I don't think it would actually work as intended. I don't know about that swearing an oath to the president instead of the Constitution. That would surprise me because, people love the Constitution. It's like the Bible and the Constitution are like the two sacred texts, right?
By the Supreme Court's grant of total immunity for official acts, Donald Trump orders the Department of Justice to arrest members of the January 6th Commission, current and former DOJ employees, and political opponents for treason, election interference, and conspiracy.
I'm not sure about this one. I think that it's possible that he goes fully like, I'm going to prosecute everyone who came after me. I think that probably this is still exaggerated. And I think it's also kind of interesting because, who started this, right? Like, there's been, with the whole, like, I don't think Trump was at all right to say the election was stolen in this last election. And I think he went way overboard in trying to, pressure people to in state government levels, to make him president. But, who did start this? I just want to remind people that Democrats did start the whole election theft thing when he was elected in the first place. And they have been, pursuing prosecution of Trump, maybe for the right reasons, maybe for the wrong reasons. But the point is once you start this process of prosecuting political opponents, it's a vicious cycle. You create a deeper feud. And in my opinion, as much as I think Trump is probably a crook, I think a lot of politicians are crooks on both sides of the aisle. And I think that it's very dangerous to start going after people just because you really, really dislike them. Obviously, we've seen some recent recent politicians go down and go to jail for very, very good reasons. But with Trump, it's always felt very political. So if he, in turn, goes after political enemies, like, don't be surprised. This is what happens in a feud, right? Notably, when he was in office, he did not lock her up. Hillary did not go to jail, so...
He declares it to be an official act. Trump ends birthright citizenship by executive order and turns millions of American-born citizens into illegal aliens.
I don't know where they're getting this from, because I've looked at a lot of stuff, and I'm not seeing anything where birthright citizenship has been contested. I mean, we're talking about people who are born in the United States, but to people who are not American citizens. This has been something that's been the law for as long as we can remember, right? We're not talking about kids who were brought here as kids. Dreamers are, what we refer to those kids as. Like, they were born in Mexico, and then when they were 2, they were brought over to the United States, and they grew up here. Personally, I think people who grew up here should just be made American citizens. They've lived their whole lives here. They've gone to school here. They've worked jobs here. Like, make them citizens, have them pay taxes, la-da-da-da-da. But I'm not seeing, and I've read a few things about Project 2025. I've obviously not read a 992-page document, but I don't see anything, and I haven't seen anywhere where there's any serious discussion of turning actual American citizens who were born here and were given a social security card and all the rest of the stuff. I have not seen anything saying that Trump would do that. That seems so extreme. That just feels like fear-mongering, and I just can't imagine that would be supported even by a lot of Republicans.
Overnight.
Also, mass deportations begin. I could see mass deportations happening because there are a lot of people in the Trump camp who are really, really anti-immigration or illegal immigration, and who are talking a lot about, this time around we're going to deport even more people and all that. Now, immigration is a very, very difficult subject, right? I think that by and large, peaceful, non-criminal immigrants who come here and work and have families, and a lot of Mexican immigrants, they go to church, they're law-abiding. I find that this is a waste of time and money to just deport people. Obviously, if it's criminals or gang members, all that, I think that's a perfectly good reason to deport people. But this just strikes me as a waste of time and money, and also generally inhumane. On the other hand, people complain a lot, rightfully so, that jobs are sent over to China and Asia and Mexico, and that a lot of our good factory jobs are sent away. And this is interesting too, because Trump and Vance have a very anti-global trade economic agenda that I think is very left-wing, actually. And I'll talk about that in another video. But the same sort of thing is at play. When we send jobs overseas, we are hurting our labor force. We're hurting American workers, but we're bolstering the workers of these other countries. We're helping them create a middle class. There's nothing different about that than having immigrants come into our country, illegal immigrants come in and work for lower wages that take jobs away from Americans. A lot of people are like, oh, we're really against sending jobs overseas, but we want to support illegal immigration because it's the humane thing to do. But it's a tricky issue because those two things are really very similar, right? They're very, very similar ultimately in how people are affected by them. So
deportations began. Hundreds of thousands, including legal U.S. residents and American citizens, are imprisoned in newly built homes.
This is, I guess, referring to the birthright citizenship. I'm not sure. I don't see how a bunch of U.S. citizens are put in camps. That seems totally overboard, like fear-mongering propaganda overboard.
Trump addresses the nation from the Oval Office, invoking the Insurrection Act and declaring the protesters a danger to American sovereignty. He orders the National Guard to use deadly force to suppress the protests. In the wake of the bloody violence, Trump declares nationwide martial law, awarding himself new powers under the freshly signed American Sovereignty Protection Order, which defines protest of immigration policies as non-protected speech and a threat to national security.
Again, this just seems completely over the top. Now, maybe I am just not enough in the throes of fear over a Trump presidency, but that is so extreme. I mean, I could see the National Guard being called in if protests get too out of hand. That could happen. It's not something that I expect to happen, but it could happen. But declaring that anti-immigration protests are non-protected speech and then locking people up, again, this is a huge break from any sort of tradition in American law. I think that even conservatives on the Supreme Court, maybe I'm too optimistic here, but I think even conservatives on the Supreme Court would say, a lot of conservatives are free speech advocates, actually, and there's a lot of legal history protecting free speech. So this would surprise me.
Governors in New York, California, Illinois, and elsewhere declare their opposition, promising to refuse compliance in their states. Trump orders their arrests.
Yeah, see, again, I don't think Trump's going to order the arrests of governors because they oppose some immigration stuff. Conservatives generally, they've used some dirty tricks, right? Like loading up buses of immigrants and sending them off to Chicago or whatever. That seems more likely than actually ordering the arrests of governors. I don't know. This just seems crazy to me. Maybe it's going to happen. Maybe this is how crazy the next Trump presidency will be. Or maybe this is just being used to make people so afraid and so upset that they go and vote for Biden or whoever replaces Biden, Kamala Harris, if that actually happens.
Pardons every January 6th.
This I could see happening.
Including those who assaulted the police.
Attack.
And in a white
Well, okay, that's another interesting use of language. A lot of the January 6th protesters were not attackers. It's so ironic that the left is using this language to describe a protest when they describe other protests as fine and good and and the conservative opposition to be, anti-freedom or whatever. It's like kind of hypocritical, right? Not that I'm like, yay, January 6th. Again, like, I think that got way out of hand. But then again, so did a lot of protests. So did a lot of these protests of Israel on national or on university campuses. So did a lot of BLM protests. Protests, riots, they get out of hand. It's the mob, right? And, January 6th, again, that was kind of complicated. People were let in by guards, and the police didn't do as much as they could have to stop people. And then people are getting arrested for basically like being stupid and taking their protests too far. I think there were probably some people involved in it that really would be down for like a coup and like reinstating Trump through force. I think there were people involved that probably believe those things, but 95% of the people at that protest were not trying to overthrow the federal government. But you get caught up in it, right? That's why a lot of these riots and protests get so out of hand, because people get caught up in that shit and make bad choices. Don't make poor choices, people.
He issues a new presidential medal honoring them. Many are given jobs in his administration.
Many of the protests. See, I just don't see that happening.
Renamed the Department of American Values.
Maybe that guy who was like, in like the guy from Arizona. Oh God, in like the furs and stuff. Maybe he'll get a job in the administration. Maybe he'll be the new press secretary. That would be fucking awesome. Okay, so they were going to rename the Department of Education the Department of American Values, which is super Orwellian and lame, and I hope that doesn't happen. Mandates a nationwide Christian nationalist curriculum. I think it's more likely that the Trump administration tries to ban what they see as like woke education stuff, like critical race theory, gender theory, all that stuff, which isn't as widespread as people think it is in public schools, but which I do think is like, if you're teaching critical race theory in public schools, you're probably not teaching it well. Like that should be left to university level education. If you're teaching gender stuff to kindergartners, I gotta say, like, I'm all for like, you gotta like love and accept people, but you also don't need to teach like complicated gender theory stuff that's confusing and that puts ideas in people's heads when they're so young. Like, just leave all that stuff out. You don't even need like sex education until kids are way, way older. So just leave that out until they're old enough to think for themselves and let them think the stupid things they think when they're teenagers.
It's a nationwide Christian nationalist curriculum for all schools receiving federal aid.
That is
joined by Speaker Mike Johnson.
Separation of church and state. It doesn't just disappear if Trump's elected. And conservatives, as many of them are, like pushing for more Christian stuff in government, I think that we still have a lot of conservatives, including Supreme Court justices, who would oppose a lot of that because it's unconstitutional.
And evangelical leaders announcing that the Department of Health and Human Services has reclassified mifepristone, making it illegal to distribute or prescribe, as well as new HHS regulations that make IVF treatments impossible to legally administer. Trump reverses one campaign promise by declaring a national abortion ban by executive order.
Okay. So yes, I could see lots of policies moving towards stricter rules on like the morning after pill and abortion, et cetera, et cetera. I think, my personal views on abortion and my views on like what's healthy public policy around abortion tend to be kind of contradictory. But I don't see any reason why Trump would reverse his promise and make a national abortion ban. That seems out of character for Trump, who is not a rabid anti-abortion leader. Like, he may have people around him who are, but again, I don't think, it's the same thing. I don't know if they talk about pornography in this, but I don't see Trump supporting these kind of issues. to that degree.
Order. Challenges to his authority are rejected by the Supreme Court, which has seen new appointments from Trump after it was expanded to 12 justices. He signs an executive order removing abortion records from HIPAA private.
We should expand the Supreme Court. Biden should have done that. Obama should have done that. We need more Supreme Court justices because we have a larger population now. We need more representatives in the House because we have a larger population now. There are lots of things we could do to expand and make it a more democratic and sensible federal government. Removing abortion records from HIPAA privacy regulations. Maybe that'll happen. I have no idea.
Privacy regulations.
That seems fucked up because I think privacy is important.
States can monitor women's periods.
But so do lots of
Thousands
conservatives.
Involved crossing state lines under suspicion of seeking an abortion.
Okay. Do you know the infrastructure that would be required to detain thousands of people crossing state borders? Like, we're talking about a massive expansion of the federal government, and I just don't see that happening. Like, who are detaining these people crossing state lines? Are we going to have checkpoints between Arizona and California, between Texas and Ohio, between New York and New Jersey? Like, are we really going to have checkpoints all around the country between states to check if people are getting abortions? Like, I guess I could see, like, some 1984 shit where there's just such violations of privacy that happens. But it just sounds like fantasy to me.
Trump's acting Secretary of Defense, a disgraced ex-general, fires over 400 generals and admirals, leaving the military leaderless.
That
Other Trump
doesn't seem likely.
links the CIA.
That seems more likely.
Just
That seems much more likely than the
by
military.
executive order, Trump withdraws the United States from NATO.
That I could see happening.
Ends Pentagon cooperation with Ukraine.
Okay.
Russian tanks enter Kyiv. Vladimir Zelensky is killed. It is announced that Trump will
Okay. Before we get to this third term, I've never supported the Ukraine war. I mean, the Ukrainians, it's not that I don't support Ukraine fighting Russia or whatever. It's just none of our business. And I've said that forever. And I said the same thing about Iraq. And I said the same thing about Afghanistan, other than taking out Osama bin Laden, which makes sense. You should do that. But toppling Saddam Hussein was a mistake. Lebanon, Muammar Gaddafi, mistake. Like, we need to get out of all of these foreign entanglements. It's not a foreign policy that I support. I've always thought that the Trump foreign policy is a lot less horrible than the neocon policy of the Bush administration. But it's not just the Bush administration, because really, Clinton, Biden, all of these Democrats and most Republicans have had a hawkish, interventionist foreign policy platform that really, when they say it's just one party, it's the war party. I totally agree with that. I guess the one place where I've kind of backed off of that a little bit is Israel, because I consider Israel an ally more than Ukraine. Just like I know, if France was being attacked, I would say, well, France is an ally. Of course, that's happened, and we've gone to help them in Vietnam, which was a big mistake. But I don't think. Okay, Trump announced the third term. I don't see that happening either. You want to know my prediction? It's J.D. Vance will be the president after Trump, unless the Democrats get their act together. Watching his speech at the RNC, he's very charismatic. He is articulate. He's a former Marine. The crowd seemed to love him. Yeah. He's young, which is a huge breath of fresh air compared to the octogenarians we have running right now. I said when I first heard Obama speak, which I believe was at the Democratic Convention for John Kerry, I said, that's going to be our next president in the next time around after Bush goes. And I was right, and I'm going to call Vance now. And I don't think Trump runs again. I think that he does all this, and then he's old enough that he's not going to go through all the headache of running for a third term, and he's going to go out, and Vance will win. Because the Democrats I just don't see there's no Obamas anymore in the Democratic Party that I've seen. Maybe that'll change.
Run for a third term, claiming he was unfairly cheated in the 2020.
I mean, I could see this happening.
The Supreme Court ultimately agrees with this interpretation, paving the way for Trump's 2020.
But again, that opens a whole new bag of worms, right?
Hear all this and believe it isn't possible. Then ask yourself, what did you believe was impossible just 8 years ago?
Okay. I could see it. Now, if Trump breaks the the custom of we've the custom of 2 terms was set by George Washington, and it was broken by FDR during a wartime. Now, it could be, I could see it happening again with Trump. That's possible. Trump's old, though. He's not going to last forever, I don't think. He seems to be pretty well preserved. But if that happens, of course, that opens the door for that for any future president to run for multiple terms. So that opens the door for the other side to do the same thing. I don't see this happening. I think it's much more likely that Vance is elected after Trump. As for, like, you ask yourself, what did you believe was possible 8 years ago? I mean, shit was crazy during the Trump years. Like, so much shit was, like, off the wall. Like, just the things he said, bullshit on Twitter. And, of course, there was COVID, which was not Trump's fault, and he did actually support the vaccine. Was it actually so much worse during the Trump years than, say, the Bush years? Or, like what? Like, I don't agree with a lot of Trump's policies, but were any of them so radically bad compared to previous Republican administrations, or even some Democrat administrations, right? And yeah, some of his stuff is I think probably the worst thing, if you're just looking at the politics of it, was the fact that he was able to appoint all these justices and get a 6-3 majority on the court. But that was, I still blame Obama and Ruth Bader Ginsburg for that, because really Obama should have been able to appoint a couple justices during his tenure, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg should have immediately resigned when he became president, because she was really old, and he could have appointed a young justice, and then they wouldn't have a 6-3 majority right now. It might be 5-4 because the Republicans might have still blocked Merrick Garland, but who knows? All right. So I don't know, like, did anything in the Trump years equal, like, appointing 50,000 MAGA loyalists in the bureaucracy? Did anything equal deporting millions or ending birthright citizenship or locking up governors? Like that, none of that happened, right? So calm your horses, cool your jets.
This isn't a fantasy.
It is kind of a fantasy.
I'm counting on you to believe it couldn't happen.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't. I think some of that could happen. I think a lot of it is fantasy. I think, again, it goes back to this idea that politics is never just like one group gets in charge and makes everything happen. I mean, that happens in really totalitarian governments, right? And in some systems of government where you really get a mandate, like in some parliamentary systems, you really get a mandate, and then you can push a much more extreme agenda. But then in those systems, of course, you can just lose the government much easier as well. I think what we're going to see is some aspects of Project 2025 and Trump's agenda are going to go through. Many of them will go through, but only in a watered down form. Much compromise will be made. And a lot of people are going to, like, you have those extremists like Stephen Miller. You have these extremists in Trump's camp, but you have a lot of other people who are a lot more moderate, who are not going to really want to just completely change the entire government of the United States and start, throwing a bunch of Americans in detention camps and arresting all these political opponents and ending the basic fundamentals of free speech. Like, this seems absolutely radical to me. But what do I know? I just write about TV shows. I guess I was looking at this Lincoln Project thing and thinking, oh, this is like reviewing a fictional TV show, because so much of it strikes me as fiction. And I am coming at this, again, as someone who does not support Trump. I am not a Trumper, but I try to be practical. I'm trying to be practical here. Just like I don't look at Biden and I don't think, oh, he's a Marxist, motherfucker. No, Biden is he is a right-wing Democrat. He's like a centrist who's, like, in his dotage adopted some language of the woke left because it's become such a prominent political factor in the Democratic Party. But Biden has been tough on crime. He's been pro-war. He's been all kinds of things like that strike me as fairly right-wing, because I am not a moderate Democrat, right? Like, I'm not a corporate Democrat. So, let me know what you think. I'm going to talk some politics on this channel because it's election season and there's some interesting things going on. High drama, assassination attempts, these far-fetched videos from the Lincoln Project. All this, it's like a drama. It's like an actual, it's like Succession or, one of these great political shows or business shows. And so I'm going to talk about it through that lens of like, let's look at this fact versus fiction, reality versus just what's drama. And I guess as a TV and movie critic, like watching something like this makes me think it's like I'm looking for the ways that they're trying to tell a story. They're telling this story. They want you to believe it. Trump tells his own story. His supporters tell a story about who Trump is. And who is Trump? After the assassination attempt, I said, I hope that he calls for unity. And he actually has. He's in his speech, he said, I want to be president for all Americans, because what's the point of being president for just 50%? I thought that was a great thing to say. Whether he means it or not, I don't know. But he said it, and that's good. J.D. Vance has said things like, he wants to support workers, including union workers. That's great to hear from a conservative. Frankly, I'm all about limiting these trade agreements. Honestly, I think the Democrats were outflanked by Vance when he started talking about these bad deals and he was anti-Iraq war. Like, and he pinned a lot of that on Biden. Of course, a lot of Republicans have been just as gung-ho for these trade deals, or if not more so, and just as gung-ho for Iraq, obviously, if not more so. But, Trump was against the Iraq war. Trump has spoken out against these trade deals that are not necessarily good for American workers, and I'm all about that. That's a Bernie Sanders thing. I'm a Bernie guy. And these sound like things that Bernie would say, right? So, let me know what you think in the comments. I will stop rambling. Thank you for watching. Peace.